How the 12 apostles died. The Bible does not tell us about the death of all the apostles. There are only a few apostles whose death the Bible records. The rest are from old Christian traditions. Number 1. James. This record is written straight from the Bible. James, the son of Zebedee, was one of Jesus' closest friends. He was there at some of the most important moments in Jesus' life, like the Transfiguration, where James saw Jesus shining in glory, alongside Moses and Elijah. James, along with his brother John, was nicknamed Son of Thunder. Why? Maybe it was because of his bold personality or his fiery passion for the gospel. But that boldness also made him a target. The Bible tells us in Acts 12 that King Herod wanted to please the leaders, who were upset about the growth of Christianity. To win their approval, Herod decided to attack the church, and James became one of his first victims. James lived up to the promise he made when he told Jesus he was ready to drink the cup Jesus drank. He was the first of the apostles to lay down his life for the gospel, showing us all what it means to stay strong in faith. Number 2. Simon Peter. Simon Peter, known simply as Peter, was one of Jesus' closest friends and the leader of the apostles. He started out as a fisherman, an ordinary man called to do extraordinary things. Jesus renamed him Peter, which means rock, saying, "On this rock I will build my church." But Peter's journey of faith wasn't always smooth. He made mistakes, doubted, and even denied knowing Jesus 3 times. Yet, through God's grace, Peter became one of the most courageous leaders of the early church. Church tradition tells us that Peter was arrested and sentenced to die for his faith. But Peter didn't run or hide. He had once denied Jesus out of fear, but now he was ready to give everything, even his life, for his Savior. Peter was sentenced to die by crucifixion, the same brutal death that Jesus endured. But Peter had one last request. He asked to be crucified upside down. Why? Because he didn't feel worthy to die in the same way as his Lord. The Roman soldiers granted his request, and Peter's life on earth came to an end. Number 3. Andrew. Andrew was one of the first disciples to follow Jesus. In fact, Andrew is often called the first called, because he met Jesus before most of the other apostles. He was the one who told his brother, Peter, "We have found the Messiah." Andrew was humble and full of faith, always pointing others to Jesus. After Jesus ascended to heaven, Andrew became a bold preacher of the gospel. He traveled to many places, sharing the good news of salvation. Tradition says he preached in regions as far as modern-day Turkey, Greece, and possibly even parts of Russia. But not everyone welcomed Andrew's message. In Patras, a Roman governor was furious when Andrew preached to his wife, who became a Christian. The governor ordered Andrew to stop, but Andrew refused to deny Jesus. His punishment? Death by crucifixion. Like his brother Peter, Andrew didn't feel worthy to die the same way Jesus did. So he asked to be crucified on a cross shaped like an X. But instead of being nailed to the cross, Andrew was tied to it, prolonging his suffering. Number 4. Jude. It's traditionally believed that Jude was martyred in Syria on his missionary journey with Simon the Zealot. But it's unclear how reliable this tradition is because it comes from the account found in Acts of Simon and Jude. Number 5. Thomas. Thomas is often remembered as Doubting Thomas, but his story is about so much more than doubt. It's about finding faith and courage, even when belief seems impossible. Church tradition tells us that Thomas traveled farther than any of the other apostles, bringing the message of Jesus to India. There, he preached to kings, merchants and common people alike. But preaching in a foreign land wasn't easy. Thomas faced fierce opposition from those who worshipped other gods. According to tradition, Thomas angered a local king by converting many of his subjects, including members of the royal family. The king's priests plotted against Thomas, and their hatred soon turned deadly. Thomas was attacked by soldiers near Mylapore, India. They surrounded him and stabbed him with spears. But even as he faced death, Thomas stood firm in his faith, refusing to deny the Jesus he once doubted. Thomas died a martyr, his blood sealing the faith he had once questioned. Number 6. Philip. Philip was one of the first apostles called by Jesus. He had a heart for bringing others to meet the Savior, including Nathanael, one of the 12. Philip's curiosity and willingness to question made him relatable, and his faith grew stronger as he followed Jesus. After Jesus' ascension, Philip traveled far and wide to share the gospel. Tradition says he preached in areas like modern-day Turkey, Syria, and Greece. Philip's message reached both Jews and Gentiles, and he often performed miracles that amazed and converted people. According to church tradition, Philip was arrested along with Bartholomew after converting the wife of a Roman official. The angry officials sentenced both apostles to be crucified. But even as he faced death, Philip continued to preach about Jesus. Philip gave his life for the gospel, becoming a powerful witness even in his final moments. His story reminds us that faith often requires courage, and that even in the face of death, the message of Jesus cannot be silenced. Number 7. Bartholomew. Bartholomew, also called Nathanael, was one of the apostles chosen by Jesus. When Philip first told him about Jesus, Bartholomew was skeptical. "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" he asked. But when Jesus spoke to him, revealing that he saw Bartholomew under the fig tree, Bartholomew believed and declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." From that moment, his life was never the same. Tradition says that Bartholomew converted the king of Armenia and many others, but this enraged the priests who worshiped false gods. They plotted against him, determined to silence his message. Bartholomew faced a brutal death. According to the most widely accepted tradition, he was flayed alive, his skin removed, and then beheaded. This horrifying act shows the lengths to which his enemies went to try to silence the gospel. Number 8. Matthew. Matthew, also known as Levi, was a tax collector when Jesus called him. Tax collectors were despised by their own people because they worked for the Romans and often cheated others to make themselves rich. But when Jesus invited Matthew to follow him, everything changed. Matthew left his old life behind to become one of the 12 apostles. Matthew's story reminds us that no one is beyond the reach of God's grace. After Jesus' resurrection, Matthew dedicated his life to spreading the gospel. Tradition says he traveled to places like Ethiopia, Persia, and Parthia, sharing the good news with those who had never heard it. His words and writings brought hope to many, and his gospel became a cornerstone of the New Testament, showing the world who Jesus was and what he came to do. But sharing the gospel wasn't without danger. Matthew faced opposition wherever he went. According to tradition, he was martyred for his faith. Some accounts say he was stabbed to death with a spear, while others claim he was burned, stoned, or beheaded. The details may differ, but one thing is clear: Matthew gave his life for the Savior he loved. Number 9. James, son of Alphaeus. James, the son of Alphaeus, is one of the more mysterious apostles. He is mentioned only a few times in the Bible, and not much is known about his life. Because of this, James is often called James the Less. But don't let his nickname fool you. His faith and dedication to Jesus were anything but less. According to some accounts, James's ministry angered the religious leaders of the time. They were determined to silence him, just as they had silenced Jesus and others who followed him. But James continued to preach with courage, knowing the risks. One tradition tells us that James was brought to the top of the temple by religious leaders who demanded that he deny Jesus. But James refused. Instead, he used the opportunity to proclaim the truth of the gospel to the crowd below. Enraged, the leaders pushed him off the pinnacle of the temple. James's story is a reminder that even those who seem to work quietly behind the scenes can have a profound impact for God's kingdom. His faithfulness, humility, and courage continue to inspire Christians around the world.